from Novell, JS Riehl, speaking about open source and their Suse solutions.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm very excited about here with you tonight. Before I start, how many of you use open source on a regular basis in your job? Great question. That's going to be a great session then. So tonight I'm going to speak about what Novell does in open source, and then in the later part of this presentation I'm going to speak about some really cool project you might be interested in. Because we only have 25 minutes, it's going to be at a high level, but we'll be more than happy to come back and have a real deep down technical discussion on a very specific product if that's of interest to you. Okay, a few facts that you already know. Linux is the next big tide coming up. More than 3 million production servers already today using Linux. I often get the question, when will Linux desktop be, as popular as Windows desktop? And something that people may not know, you already have about 10 million Linux desktop today in production. And I think it's really going to change over the next few years. And specifically next year, there's going to be a new release of the Novell Linux desktop. I got to see a demonstration. I got to see a demonstration of the next Linux desktop, and it's really amazing. For the very first time, you're going to see some features in a Linux desktop that do not exist in Windows. Things like a 3D desktop, things like Beagle, which is the index engine integrated into a Linux desktop. And this is not going to appear until Vista in 2007. More than 100,000 projects in the community. You know that better than me. Linux is really happening. Some more interesting information as well. Linux is really not a project out of college students. There are people like you and me. There are professionals with 11 years of experience in the space, which explains the quality of the software, of the Linux software that you find today in the community. It's because it's developed by people who are really experienced, and because it's open source as well. As Erin Raymond said one day, the more eyeballs, the more shallow are the bugs. So the more people can have access to the source code, usually the better the quality of the source code is.
Now, if only they could make better packages.
We're working on that.
Keep going. Don't belabor that one with us. We're the people who have to fight that.
For that matter, their patch system's pretty good.
Thank you. So this is the marketing slide before we get into some of the cooler projects. Where do we see Linux today at Novell? We actually see it everywhere. And what's really interesting, it's really the pervasive OS. How many of you are using Z-Series today, or are managing Z-Series, Z computers from IBM? I know you are administrators here. Anybody's using Z-Series? Okay.
This is Silicon Valley, we have some.
Yeah, we usually see a lot of that in financial institutions and big supermarkets, so I was just wondering. Exactly.
West Coast rules.
So basically the whole point of this slide is we see it everywhere at the perimeter of the network, which is like firewall, VPNs, and so on and so forth, on the desktops, on the data center, in clusters, running databases, and so on and so forth. The reason why I speak about the mainframe, it's really interesting because it's actually a very interesting business for Suse. We've got 80% market share in that space, and we probably the only distribution that can work, very well on all these different environments. Okay, so there's a lot of confusion about the different Linux products from Novell. So these whole slides tell you the difference that you get in all these different products and distributions. What's really important is at the heart of all these different products is Suse Linux Enterprise Server. This is the same code base. All these products share the same code base. So whatever you learn...
Do they share the same build tree?
No, and I'm going to get into that, if I understand your question well. Basically, they all have the same code base, but they have different packages and they build differently.
I mean, do you have master servers inside your site where you actually build off the same code tree?
Yes.
With a different make command?
Exactly. Well, I'm going to talk about that in my next slide. So if you could just hold on that question. So at the heart of it is a Suse Linux Enterprise Server and Suse Linux Enterprise code base. And from there we have different products. Novell Linux Desktop, which is a desktop product. Novell Open Enterprise Server. What is that? It is basically our work group solution. So if you try to deploy Linux today in a work group kind of environment, it works fine. You can deploy file and print services. You can deploy a lot of services. But as you scale up, it's very difficult to manage and to integrate. What this does, it basically integrates all these different services with eDirectory, Novell's directory solution. So think about it in a way as a Windows server to a certain extent, Windows 2003 server with all its functionality, but running on top of Linux. On top of that as well, we added some additional end-user services like iPrint, which is a really cool solution which simplifies the printing services in a corporate environment. So what I mean by that is, from an end-user point of view, with iPrint, end users don't have to worry about what printer they're going to print to and where they're located and so on and so forth. What they can do now, they can go to a website, look at a map. We're on the second floor of the Apple building. I've got all these different printers next to my cubicle. I click on that printer, and automatically the magic behind it is going to install all the different drivers that I need, and it's going to print directly to that printer. And what's really cool about it is that it works on Linux, Macintosh, and Windows desktops. So it really simplifies printing services for end users. And for administrators as well, now administrators just have to configure once every single printer in the directory, and they can automatically manage all these printers. So that's one of the services. The other service that is included with Novell Open Enterprise Server is a file sharing technology that I'm going to talk about, which is open source as well. We've got solutions for the data center as well. You're going to hear much more about that, notably with the Zen guys, over the next few months. Nobody, I guess, is in retail here, but we have an end-to-end solution. Somebody in retail. We've got an end-to-end solution for the retail space and as well for small businesses. Again, Novell is really a Linux and identity management company. We really focus on these two businesses. So Linux is right at the center of this slide. And what we mean by identity management is asset management with our ZenWorks product line, which helps you manage servers, desktops, PDAs, and so on and so forth, as well as identity management, which manages identities in your enterprise. So how you synchronize, let's say, your Oracle database with your Windows database, with your PeopleSoft database, yes.
Does that use LDAP or Kerberos or what?
For what?
For the identities.
So eDirectory uses LDAP, and it's really the central repository for all your identities.
So you're saying you've bought into LDAP big time.
Absolutely. We've been supporting LDAP for years since it's installed. And then we wrote some specific drivers as well for these different applications. Let's say PeopleSoft. We have a specific driver. We call them a driver that can talk to a PeopleSoft application and map it into the directory. So how do we come up with a distribution? And I think that might answer some of your questions here. It all starts on the left from the community. And our effort is called OpenSuse.org. You can go over there and download a free version of Suse Linux. And I'm going to talk about that in the next few slides. What we do with it, we apply about 6,000 patches. We put our own glue around it. We package it. And then we do something that is called, we run it through what we call our auto build. What that is something really unique at Novell. I believe we're the only distribution that has that capability. Is within 22 hours we can create that distribution for different set of platforms, all the way from the x86 platform to the Power series to the Z series, even though you're not using it here today. And once we create those different distributions, we test them against our regression testing tools, as well against SuperLab, which is a big supercomputer at Novell. And once it meets our acceptance criteria, we ship our product being Suse Linux Enterprise Server. or Novell Linux Desktop or the derivative products.
Is Intel 64 Titanium or is it AMD 64?
Both.
Yeah, but I mean Intel 64 Titanium?
Yeah,
Okay.
that is correct. So again, that is really unique to Novell. I believe we're the only company that can release on the same day a distribution for all these different platforms based on the same code base.
I think the Debian does something pretty similar. I mean,
Okay.
obviously they don't have a commercial company behind
De-
it.
Debian takes weeks to turn that crank, though.
Okay.
And again, so what is the right product for you? It really depends on your needs. If you're an enthusiast, you can go to OpenSuse.org, download the latest software and play with it. If you like having a manual, some amount of limited support, you would buy the Suse Linux product, Suse Linux only, that you can go to Fry's today and purchase it for $50 or $60. But then if you want an enterprise-ready distribution, that would be a Novell Linux Desktop or a Suse Linux Enterprise Server desktops. What the value that we add is we certify those very specific enterprise class distribution against some reference hardware from IBM, Novell, IBM, HP, Dell, and against ISV applications as well. We certify across 900 applications.
But you don't certify on any ThinkPad. Fix that.
I'm sorry?
You don't certify on any ThinkPad from IBM. Fix that.
Okay. I thought they had some
ThinkPad.
I thought there are some ThinkPad that are certified. Not all of them, but if you actually go to...
Not that I know of, and I'm a Novell dealer, and...
Give me your business card, and I'll send you the list.
we didn't see any.
Then we'll find out which webmaster needs to be shot.
Okay, now Novell and open source, we heavily contributing to the open source world. There's a whole laundry list here. In some of these projects, we actually have a leading role, like in Mono that I'm going to talk about, iFolder, Hula, and so on and so forth. So really what I want to do is spend the next 5 minutes talking about a few really cool projects which might be of interest to you. Again, my goal at the end of this presentation is to make you so excited about Linux that you're going to even use it even more or maybe contribute. So make a difference, contribute to the open source tide. So this is where we start, OpenSuse.org. You can have access to the source code. If you want to influence the way Suse Linux is going to be tomorrow, this is where you would go and you would start contributing. What you will find over there, you will find source code, you will find free version of Suse Linux, you will find forums, you will find some amount of support. And if you're a developer, you'll find all the development tools that you need to contribute to the community and to the OpenSuse project. Okay, now we're coming to some of the really, really cool projects. How many of you use OpenOffice today? That's really cool. That is really cool.
Every other minute.
When I'm forced to use productivity software.
Right. So for those of you who haven't used OpenOffice, have a look at OpenOffice 2.0. It's really amazing. It's day and night between the 1.4 version and 2.0. Better compatibility with Microsoft, better UI, you name it. We're actually doing a lot of work at Novell to actually support VB scripts as well.
Does it run any faster than it did before? Because I actually went to the trouble at one point in order to make a point. I actually downloaded OpenOffice for Win32 and tried using it on my Windows machine. And I was so disappointed with the performance of it on either Spark or under Windows that I grumbled and I went back to using Microsoft Office simply because it was such a performance.
Right.
Oh,
My experience with 2.0 has been really good, so I'm not sure whether it's been your experience as well. But
How fast is your CPU?
2 gigahertz.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
okay.
2 gig of RAM.
So what this means is that those of us who are limping along on 128 meg of memory and only have a 400 megahertz processor, we're screwed.
We're a happy word.
You need to buy new machines.
Yeah.
So this book that needs reviewing is a book on OpenOffice
deals with
2.0.
Japanese characters.
So if you're interested in checking out the software.
All right, so you were saying about cool project.
Yeah, so this one, iFolder, is one of my favorite projects. It is absolutely amazing. What that allows you to do is share files between computers. So, and they would get synchronized automatically. So let's say this is my work machine. I can create a document, and I can go to my home machine, and I would have the same version completely synchronized. I would have the same version of that document on that home machine. And I could be running Windows. So this is a great feature to, let's say, to synchronize all your pictures, for instance. And this is as well, a lot of our customers are using this solution to, as a backup solution for people who use notebooks. When a notebook crash, they basically have to reissue another notebook. They install the iFolder client. It synchronizes, and within 20 minutes, they have all the data back on the desktop.
What's the underlying engine?
CMIAS.
CVS?
CMIAS. It's an open source project. SIMIAS, I believe.
Not heard of it.
iFolder.com, you'll find exactly.
Okay, what's the underlying mechanism then? Is it a file system? Is it a synchronization system?
Synchronization.
Okay.
The other really cool thing about iFolder now, with version 3, is that once a user is provisioned on an iFolder server, that user can share different files and directories and can share it with specific groups as well. So let's say I'm going to share a file with Bob and Mark, and I can even decide that Bob is going to have read and write access, but Mark will only have read access. And the user will be able to set those access preferences, those write access. And the user doesn't have to involve the administrator to perform those tasks.
Presumably it's using LDAP for its identification?
I know at Novell it's integrated in Open Enterprise Server, so it's using eDirectory. I know it's also available as an open source project, and I'm not exactly sure which version of directory it's using, but it's probably LDAP.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
I would assume it would actually just authenticate locally, which then your local system would authenticate against whatever system you're using. I mean,
So in a corporate environment, it would actually look up your credentials, and you can probably as well look it up to another LDAP compliant system, but it would look up eDirectory, and it would look all the different users in the directory tree, and the end user would be able to assign the rights depending on the users he can see or she can see.
Is the data just peer-to-peer, or is it also stored on the server?
It's also stored on the server. So actually you go through the server first, and then the server.
And is there any version controlling?
So there is some version controlling, and if I modify a document and Bob as well, it's going to flag it out, and it's going to say, hold on, you've got a conflict, what do you want to do about it? Really, really cool.
I presume it's not worth asking the security questions?
Sure, ask. So yeah, it gets transmitted, it gets encrypted all the way between the client and the server. In version 2.1 of iFolder, actually, you have the information encrypted on the server itself. 3.1, it's not encrypted on the server for different reasons, because they had to rewrite the code, but in the next version, it's going to be encrypted on the server as well. So really cool. If you have some work group project, have a look into that, or use it at home. It's really, really interesting. We also have a free calendar and mail server, but I don't think I need to talk about it today after the presentation we just had. If you're interested, it's ULA. Two other really cool projects as well. If you're a developer and you really want to improve the UI of your Linux application, the first project is called Better Desktop. BetterDesktop.org. Novell is really focused on Linux desktop. We've got 75 people working full-time on the desktop. And it's going to be very exciting.
On KP, not GNOME, please.
On both. But Nat Friedman is a big GNOME contributor, and he's part of Novell.
I know. It's just that in this crowd, this group of people, we like to tell our computers what to do, not the other way around.
Right.
Well, that's why I use FBWM.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, but you will be able to use it with KDE and GNOME. So BetterDesktop.org, Novell did a lot of usability testing for several months. They put a lot of Windows users who were not that experienced in front of a Linux desktop, asked them to perform some very specific tasks, and they released all that data on the internet. You can even watch the videos, how people interact. So if you're into designing UIs, definitely go there and you'll find a wealth of information. And finally, I must speak about Mono, which is the open source implementation of the .NET framework. What's really cool about Mono is that as you develop an application using Mono, you can make it available to Windows, Linux, and Macintosh clients. For instance, the iFolder project I've just told you about was written in record time using Mono. And it's a really, really powerful. It actually doesn't even force you to use a specific IDE, even though you've got an IDE that comes with Mono. If you're familiar with Visual Studio.NET, you can still use VS.NET and use Mono in the backend as well to create applications for all these different platforms. The really cool thing as well about Mono is it provides additional capabilities, like integration with the let's say the Firefox engine. So if you want to write some application that use some additional libraries, it is available for you. Again, everything open source.
We've got a few more minutes for you folks to ask him questions while Ben comes up here and gets his machine set up.
I've got the most important slide. Thanks for coming.